I was genuinely like, had a moment of realization. Okay, I am back with Dan from UK Bike Fit, and you might have seen our previous video about how to translate a bike fit from one bike to another. Well, we're here in this video to answer the question that you've all been asking, which is, how do you choose the right geometry of a new bike before you've got it? So as a good example, I've got a new bike coming. It's a titanium bike from an incredible brand in the UK called Riley. And we thought it would be a good example to show what frame should I get, what size should I get based on the measurements that I have here for my current Canyon bike. So Dan, talk me through it. I've got my measurements for my Canyon. I feel good on it. I've got a good fit. What geometry, what frame should I be ordering from Riley?
So I think the first thing to be aware of is like the difference that different brands frame their sizes or label their frame sizes. So some brands, as people know, is like small, medium, large, and some are 52, 54, 56, and it's working out how all of those frames compare, and that's what we're going to do today by looking at geometry.
So they're not the same. One medium is not another medium.
Nope.
What about like if it's a 54, it's got to be equivalent, no?
No, because there's no, like, historically, like there was a measurement, like a tube measurement that was maybe 54, but now it's just a number that they label their frames with. So 154 versus another 54 in terms of geometry and fit is going to can be completely different. Okay, so what are we going to do? How are we going to figure it out? So we're going to compare the geometry of your current bike now with the Riley using a website called Geometry Geeks, and we're going to use those numbers to work out frame size. Yeah, so this website is really cool. Dan showed me it. On most bike manufacturers' websites, they'll have like a list of geometry from the bike, but it can kind of get confusing to compare them both. And so this website, geometrygeeks.bike, is basically they've got pretty much all of the bikes already built in there, and you can just compare one bike versus the other. So that's what we're going to do with the Canyon Endurace, that's my current bike, and this new Riley T325. So we've got Geometry Geeks open, we've got my current frame geometry, and then we've got the new Riley bike as well, and we've opened up the small, the medium, and the large. So Dan, we've got reach, stack, top tube effective, what do these things mean, and should there be any that we pay particular attention to? Yeah, so to simplify it right down into what we need to look at to work out our frame size, we're going to look at two main ones to start with, which is frame reach and frame stack. Okay. So on this website, they are the top two measurements to look at, which makes it nice and easy. So we've got your Canyon Endurace up here, and we can see a reach of 382 and a stack of 578. For now, we'll just disregard everything else and just focus on those two. And actually, helpfully on this website, there is a diagram at the bottom of each page that shows you what those measurements are. So if you want to visualize that, you can scroll down and have a bit of a look. Interestingly, when I think reach, I'm thinking the stem and the handlebars, but actually this doesn't include those things. No. So before you even get to thinking about stem, these are the numbers that we're trying to match. Yeah, so this is just the frame. So if you imagine your bike without anything on it, just the bike frame, we're going from the top of the head tube. So it doesn't take into account your spacers, your stem, your bars, your shifters, anything like that. It's just from the top of the head tube. Okay. So what have we got here then? We've got the small, medium and large of the Riley bike. What are you seeing? So there's one that obviously just stands out with these numbers in particular, just because the reach is exactly the same on the medium Riley versus your Canyon Endurace. But on the others, you know, you look at the small and you look at the large. The small is only 8mm shorter and the large is only 10mm longer. That's a stem size or less. So there's no real difference if we're just looking at frame reach from the bottom bracket. There's not a huge difference there. But as we get further down the line, like you'll start to see that there are other differences that will make a big change to your fit reach, the length of your body when you're riding the bike. So what's the next thing that you're looking at then after reach? So it looks like the medium's the right size. What else are you looking at here? So if you just looked at reach, you could say, well, I could fit a small with a slightly longer stem, or I could fit a large with a shorter stem. So we need to differentiate a little bit more. Right. So the next thing we're going to look at is the frame stack. The Riley in the medium is 14mm lower than your Endurace. So again, this is only taking into consideration the frame. So we can adjust your body positions stack, if you like, by adding and taking spacers away. For example, the Riley being 14mm lower in the frame, that would mean that if we put 14mm extra spacers on compared to your Canyon, you're going to get the same ride height. But I guess in this example here, the Canyon is an endurance orientated frame, but the Riley bike is slightly more aggressive. And so is that what you're seeing
there as you start to read those numbers?
Yeah, so really when we're talking about how aggressive a frame is, we're looking at the stack to reach ratio and how low a bike is, for example, for the same reach.
Right.
So we've got the same reach on these two medium frames, but the Riley is 14 mil lower, so it's a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah, if you wanted more of an aggressive frame, then it's a good thing, but also if you don't, you can just use spacers to sort of fix it out.
Yeah, so you can use spacers to obviously raise or lower the frame, but then you have to consider where you're at on your current bike. If you've already got all of the spacers possible on your bike, and we're looking at this frame that's 14 mil lower, it's going to be impossible to put 14 mil of extra spacers on the bike, on the new bike. So you're going to be riding that bike in a 14 mil lower position, and you can't adjust that anymore. So you really need to take into consideration what components you're running on your current frame and then relate that to the new one.
Yeah, and this is good for me. Like, I've been wanting something a little bit more aggressive. I'm trying to get into slightly more racier position on the bike. So I'm seeing this and thinking, great, 14 mil, slightly more aggressive.
Yeah.
I'll be doing my stretches to make sure I can hit that position. Some of these other numbers, is there anything else that you're sort of paying attention to here?
Yeah. So next, when you think you've sort of had a look at reach and stack, and you think you're sort of there with a frame size, then you want to look down the chart. The next thing that I look at is the seat tube center to top. That will tell us, in relation to saddle height, that will basically tell us how much seat post you're going to need sticking out your bike.
Right.
With this example, medium to medium on the Riley, we've got a 10 mil shorter seat tube, which would then mean you'd need 10 mil of extra seat post sticking out to achieve the same saddle height.
Right, okay. Yeah. Cool, so the seat tube, that measurement there is basically, 10 mil shorter means that we'd have 10 more mil of seat post showing, which is interesting because again, like if you're already maxed out on your seat post, then that's going to be an issue.
Yep. And with like different angle of top tube, if you've got a very sloping top tube, for example, versus another bike that has a very horizontal top tube, that seat tube is then going to be like the longer or shorter. So you really need to look at that from bike to bike, because that's going to be so different.
So we got those sort of main ones figured out. There's obviously a bunch of other numbers here. Is there anything else here that we want to be paying like particular attention to? Yeah,
so the only ones that you'd want to take into account, and this is getting a little bit deeper now into the more minute areas of frame geometry, but head angle and seat tube angle, head tube angle and seat tube angle are important. I think to keep things simple, if we just make sure that they're within a good range, they're not too different from one to another without going too deep into it.
And what would that range be? Like, are we talking half a degree or 1 degree?
So for a seat tube angle, within 1 degree should be okay.
Okay, cool.
It kind of depends on your saddle height. Like the higher your saddle height, the bigger the difference that angle's going to make. But yeah, if you can keep it to within a degree, same for the head tube as well, then you'll be safe in that it's not going to affect your fit too much. Anything outside of that, you'd probably want to look a bit deeper into it. Okay, cool.
So to sort of summarize all of this, we're looking at a couple of different measurements. We've got the reach, which is really important, and we want to make sure that that is pretty much within the range of our bike, although we can bear in mind that we can use stems to adjust that if we want to. But then we want to consider the stack. We want to think about, if it's lower, it's slightly more aggressive. If it's taller, it's slightly more relaxed. And how does that fit based on what we want this new bike to be and how we're going to be able to get fit to it. And then the other numbers, we want to make sure that they're just roughly within the same range. And I think your descriptions of those was really helpful. Obviously, that works for road bike to road bike. If I'm looking at a gravel bike, for example, and I want to kind of translate from my road bike. I don't have a gravel bike yet. Like, are you expecting to see some of these numbers differentiate because gravel bikes are slightly different?
Okay, yeah, the numbers will differentiate, and this is where you'll probably see greater differences in seat tube angle and head tube angle, because they'll change those to change the handling of the bike.
Right.
So you'll probably expect to see bigger numbers there, but translating these measurements from one frame to another is the ultimate goal is to achieve the same riding position. If you want the same riding position on your gravel bike, then yeah, transfer them as you normally would to a road bike. If you want a slightly different position because you're going to do some really technical gravel riding, or you're going to maybe race gravel, like the complete other end of the spectrum, then you might want a different riding position, and then you'd have to manipulate these numbers a little bit to try and get there with the frame. Again, that's getting a little bit more complicated, so you might want to try and find some help from a fitter, maybe, if you need to go down that route.
Yeah.
But But yeah, as long as you remember that if you transfer these numbers exactly, you're probably going to end up with a very, very similar body position in terms of your ride style.
So just to try and get sort of some learning out of this, you know, in terms of like the reach stack, the seat tube, all of that kind of stuff, would you be expecting like a slightly bigger or smaller number for any of those because of a gravel bike?
That's such a hard question. The thing is with gravel now as well, there's gravel racing types. And then totally different types. So again, depending on the bike you're looking at and depending on the type of gravel riding you're going to be doing, then you'd expect to see differences. I would still go back to imagining it as a body position and thinking, right, if the reach is longer, then I'm going to be longer with the same stem length. And if the stack is taller, I'm going to be more upright.
So I think, so if reach is longer and the stack is lower, that's more aggressive. But if the stack is higher and the reach is shorter, then that's slightly more relaxed.
Yeah.
So typically, for me, I like to be more aggressive on my road bike and less aggressive on my gravel bike because I don't race. I'm sort of there just to, you know, enjoy the countryside or whatever. But if you did race your gravel bike, you might want a fit that's slightly closer to like an aggressive road position because you'd be aero and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, obviously a lot in this. There's quite a lot of depth to this, and I think, like Dan said, if you really want to be specific, you know, if you're getting a custom built bike or something like that, and you want to be really specific on it, go and get a bike fit. Go and get a bike fit before, and someone like Dan will give you like exact measurements for what you should be looking for. But hopefully that's a bit of a summary if you're in the market for a new bike or you're looking at something. If you've got any questions, leave them down below. Hopefully that was helpful and hopefully you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.